and I hope you enjoy your week here learning about the nation's parliament. Questions without notice. I give the call to the Leader of the Opposition.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Prime Minister. Prime Minister, at a time when Labor's policies are driving up cost of living pressures for families, the government has just signed up to funding a $2 trillion loss and damage climate fund, which will send money overseas and beyond our region. Prime Minister, doesn't charity begin at home? And when will you start helping Australian families instead of giving away their money?
I give the call to the Prime Minister.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. And I do thank the Leader of the Opposition for really repeating a question that he answered last week. And I'll begin the same way. I tell you what we will do, or we won't do, which is to stand at a press conference with a microphone making jokes about Pacific Islands drowning. That is what we won't do. And the misleading statement from the Leader of the Opposition aimed clearly.
Order. Members on my right. The Minister for Skills will cease interjecting and give the call to the Manager of Opposition Business.
Well, Mr Speaker, the Prime Minister's opening remarks breached several standing orders, offensive words, reflection on a member, and he should turn to the detail of the question.
The order. Members on my... The member for Cooper will cease interjecting. The Prime Minister is 40 seconds into the question. It was a very broad question, political in its nature. I'm listening carefully to the Prime Minister and give him the call.
Thanks, Mr Speaker. I'll tell you what was offensive. It was the Tactics Committee meeting that came up with that question this morning. That was what was offensive, because the idea that any foreign aid is giving Australians money to foreigners ahead of Australian interests, the Leader of the Opposition knows better than exactly what he is doing with that question. He knows exactly. And the only people who are pleased about that question are the people sitting in the corner up there, because they represent seats that have rejected that sort of dog-whistling tactic from the Liberal Party.
Order.
And the Leader of the Opposition—
Members on my left.
The Leader of the Opposition, who pretends he wants to be kinder and gentler, comes into this house.
Order.
Comes into this house and asks a question like that. Well, I'll tell you what the entry fee is. To enter into discussions around the table with our international partners, whether it's the United Kingdom, whether it's the United States, whether it's Japan, whether it's India, it is taking climate change seriously. That is the entry ticket that you need in international affairs in 2022. What you don't need is that sort of nonsense. And for a political party who say that Australia reducing our emissions isn't good enough because we need a global reduction in emissions, but then to press that button shows the contradiction which is there. I'd say to the Leader of the Opposition, you're better than that. Or maybe you're not.
Okay. Order. Order. There is far too much noise in the chamber. Questions will be heard in silence, and I'll give the call. The member for O'Connor. I'll give the call to the member for Chisholm.
Thank you, Speaker. My question is to the Prime Minister. What work was undertaken at recent international summits to advance Australia's national interest?
Give the call to the Prime Minister.
Thank you very much, Mr Speaker, and I thank the member for her question. Over an 8-day period, I attended 4 summits representing Australia, and it was a great honour to do so. I represented Australia at the ASEAN Australia Summit and then the East Asia Summit that were held in Cambodia, the G20 hosted by Indonesia and APEC hosted by Thailand. Mr Speaker, Australia is back as a partner. Australia is engaged with the world, bringing a calm, mature and collaborative approach to international relations. We have major global challenges, and global challenges require global solutions. We've seen the impact of the Russian invasion of Ukraine that's having on not just on the people of Ukraine, but it's having an impact on the global economy as well, with rising inflation having an impact on everything from fuel right through to energy, right through to supermarket prices. And of course we're seeing also the global impact of climate change. We actually see it. We see it, and it's experienced. I spoke to Andrew Gee, the member for Calare, before question time, and we know that communities in New South Wales continue to be impacted by flooding. This gave me an opportunity as well to meet with our AUKUS partners, with President Biden, and to have a good meeting as well with Rishi Sunak, the new Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, and we discussed the importance of the AUKUS relationship, as well as being able to sit down with our traditional allies and have those discussions, including action on climate change, which both those governments prioritise. I was able to present a keynote speech to the B20 meeting, attended by business leaders from the 20 largest economies around the world. And there I thank President Widodo for that invitation. I held 14 bilateral meetings, and an important one, of course, the first meeting with China for 6 years. It was a very constructive meeting with President Xi, and I want us to move forward together with the stabilisation of the relationship. It's very clear that we have differences, but dialogue promotes understanding. My attitude towards China is that we must cooperate where we can, disagree where we must, but engage in our national interest. I also had an important meeting with Prime Minister Modi, and I'll lead a business delegation to India in the first quarter of next year. In addition to that, we're able to further develop the constructive relationship that we now have with President Macron of France and other European leaders to promote the EU-Australia Free Trade Agreement that I'm hoping to advance next year.
Give the call to the Deputy Leader of the Opposition, or cease interjecting so I can call the member for Hume.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Prime Minister. The Chief Economist of Goldman Sachs has warned that the cash rate will continue to rise to 4.1% over the next year, meaning Australian mortgage holders will be paying more for longer under this government. Will the Prime Minister confirm the promise of cheaper mortgages is now just another broken promise?
Give the call to the Treasurer. Oh.
Sorry, I thought you wanted me to start.
Order. Members on my left. The member for Hume will cease interjecting. He was heard inside. The member for Moreton is not helping, as always. I'll give the call to the member, the Treasurer.
Thank you very much, Mr Speaker. Given the Shadow Treasurer seems temperamentally incapable of asking me a question, I've got to take my chances when I can. I've got to take my chances when I can. Mr Speaker, since the 25th of October, there have been 2 eclipses, one solar, one lunar. And there have been 2 questions from the Shadow Treasurer to the Treasurer about the budget. Questions from the Shadow Treasurer to the Treasurer after the budget are as rare as a very rare celestial event, Mr Speaker. And so I've got to take my chances when I can and jump when I can, Mr Speaker. Now, let me get this straight. Let me get this straight, Mr Speaker. One of the worst ministers since Federation, the member for Hume, in one of the worst governments since Federation, one of the least responsible when it comes to the budget since Federation, which racked up $1 trillion in debt and had almost nothing to show for it, who sprayed billions of dollars around to their mates in the interests of their political purposes and their political objectives, now wants to get up and talk about spending in the budget. I mean, give me a break, Mr Speaker. Now, what was different
Members on
about
my
this
left.
budget in October compared to the budget handed down by those opposite in March is what we did is when we got a temporary boost to revenue from high commodity prices, we returned for 2 years 99% of that upward revision. And that meant over the forward estimates there's less debt in my budget over the forwards than there was in the budget handed down by Treasurer Frydenberg from this dispatch box. And so what that has meant is our budget was geared towards the inflation challenge because we know that high inflation is pushing up interest rates. Now, Treasury modelling released today and reported on today showed that if we had spent that $114 billion of tax upgrades like those opposite would have wanted to do and would have done in our position, then interest rates would be another 1.4% higher, percentage points higher than they are. And so that has meant that the rising interest rates that we inherited from those opposite interest rates started going up before the election, which might be news to the Shadow Treasurer as well. Had we not handed down such a responsible budget, then interest rates would be higher than otherwise, and inflation would be higher than otherwise. And that's why we did put so much effort into, at the same time as we kept faith with our election commitments on cheaper early childhood education and fee-free TAFE and all of the other priorities in the budget, we made sure that we showed spending restraint, which is completely foreign to those opposite. They used to spend 60% of revenue upgrades. The Howard government used to spend 70% of revenue upgrades. We spent 1% over the next 2 years. That's how you hand down a budget which doesn't make the inflation problem worse.
Order. The member for Mitchell. Give the call to the member for Fremantle.
Thank you, Speaker. My question is to the Prime Minister. What actions did the government take to secure the release of Professor Sean Turnell?
I give the call to the Prime Minister.
I thank the member for Fremantle for his question. And indeed, it was a great day last week when Professor Sean Turnell was released after 650 days in detention by the Myanmar regime. 650 days in a Myanmar prison. It was one of the great honours of my life to have the phone call with him when he landed in Bangkok at around about the same time that I did the other evening. It was fantastic that he was able to reunite with his wife, Dr Ha Vu, an economics lecturer in Melbourne on the weekend after 22 months apart, and they were able to be flown home to Sydney. Mr Turnell is a great Australian, and he's very proud to be an Australian, and we should all be proud of him. What was extraordinary about the conversation I had with him was that he was just busy thanking people, thanking the Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade, thanking the Foreign Minister, Penny Wong, thanking the embassy staff in Yangon and in Bangkok, thanking the Australian people who had campaigned so strongly for his release from that hellhole in prison. When I spoke to him, he spoke about getting food in a bucket, but that the Australian Embassy would deliver food for him, food hampers, with an Australian bag with the crest of the emu and the kangaroo. The emu and the kangaroo, of course, don't go backwards, they only go forwards. And he would put the bag facing outside of the cell so that those people who had incarcerated him would see his pride in Australia. He is a great Australian. He, of course, is a highly respected academic. He developed a specialty in the Myanmar economy, and he worked as an advisor long-term to Aung San Suu Kyi, who we met in the 1990s. He continued to live in Sydney, but he travelled regularly to Myanmar to provide advice to that country on how they might develop. He was detained on the 6th of February 2021, 5 days after the military coup. I do want to thank our friends in ASEAN who made strong representation, our friends throughout, including the Cambodian Prime Minister, Hun Sen, but others as well from Vietnam, from Thailand, from Indonesia, who were solid in their support and in supporting Australia's representation. It was a great day that he was released. I pay tribute to him for his courage, his determination and his resilience, and I wish him and his family all of the best.
On indulgence, the Leader of the Opposition.
Thank you very much, Mr Speaker. I want to join with the Prime Minister and congratulate the government on this outcome. Sean Turnell, somebody who went to Myanmar to try and provide assistance and a better way of life and future for the people of Myanmar. He worked very closely there with a number of Australian colleagues who were involved in that cause, and of course we were all shocked when he was taken into custody and the operation to release him commenced on that very day. I want to acknowledge the work of the Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade, the Department of Defence. Many other departments have been involved in this operation to lead to the point of his release. I want to say thank you very much for the perseverance that the Prime Minister spoke of many of our near neighbours and friends within ASEAN with whom we'd had close conversations over a long period of time. Every angle of opportunity to bring pressure to bear to see him released has been underway for that 650-odd days, and I want to say thank you personally to the Prime Minister as well. It's right that he's been released. It was wrong that he was held for so long, and I hope that it sends a message to the rest of the world that Australia will never tolerate our people being incarcerated in circumstances like that, and we will fight every day until they're released.
I give a call to the member for Indi.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Minister for Government Services. In my electorate, the same record rainfall that's caused widespread flooding has also caused a massive landslide which has cut off access to Falls Creek for at least 5 months, decimating the summer season economy. But those affected look at the Services Australia website and only see financial assistance for people directly affected by floods. Can the Minister confirm these people are eligible for the Disaster Recovery Allowance, and are there plans for further support?
I give the call to the Minister for the National Disability Insurance Scheme and Minister for Government Services.
I thank the member for her question. As all members here know, many local government areas right across Australia have been affected by incredibly damaging natural disaster events. Falls Creek in the Alpine Shire in the north-east of Victoria is one of 153 communities that are currently eligible for disaster assistance. Residents of there's been a landslide on the way to Falls Creek, and it's affected the businesses. And Falls Creek, whilst it's a year-round tourist facility, most of its season is in the winter. But there are businesses who still seek to operate all year round. Now, residents of Falls Creek, I can inform the member, are eligible to apply for disaster recovery allowance and also Victorian and Commonwealth-funded disaster recovery funding arrangements. Services Australia has investigated for me today in the course of the day about Falls Creek and whether or not there were payments which people were eligible for haven't been made. As I understand, there have been 46 claims made for disaster relief allowance. They've all been paid. There is one claim where the status is indeterminate, but 46 out of 47 have been made. In terms of the businesses affected year-round, that doesn't fall within the immediate preserve of Services Australia, and I'll certainly raise it with the Victorian government. But as far as my ministerial obligations are, everyone who has put in a claim has actually had it processed. If there are other people who you are aware of, who the member is aware of who haven't, we'll of course attend to it straight away. And I just want to thank Services Australia staff. They've been working all around Australia, right through central New South Wales to Rochester and Victoria, and they're doing a great job, and I send them our best wishes from the Parliament for helping people affected.
I'd like to inform the House that present in the gallery today is Mr Rob Mohawk, the State Member for Southport in the Queensland Parliament. A very warm welcome to you. And I give the call to the member for Bendigo.
Thank you, Speaker. My question is to the Treasurer. How are the ongoing flood events impacting on communities and to the economy, and how is the government responding?
Give the call to the Treasurer.
Speaker, and to the outstanding member for Bendigo for her question. We were talking this morning about how at its peak every highway into Bendigo was cut. There were 250 people being housed temporarily at the showgrounds. The ADF helped with the clean-up at Heathcote. They were able to save the poultry farm there, but not, unfortunately, the wheat, canola and hay crops. And she was telling me as well how Bendigo Senior Secondary is hosting Rochester primary and secondary schools as well, and I think that is an indication of the way that Australians look out for each other and look after each other in the toughest of times, and they've got a wonderful local member in the member for Bendigo. Now, as the Prime Minister knows, the Deputy Prime Minister, Minister Watt, Senator Sheldon, a whole range of colleagues on this side and on that side of the House, since this House last met, a lot of colleagues have been visiting flood-affected areas, and thousands of Australians in communities up and down the East Coast have been hit by the impacts of damaging and devastating flooding, especially New South Wales and Victoria, but Tassie, Queensland and South Australia has had some heavy weather in recent days as well, and we're now all too familiar with what this means. Homes wrecked, businesses shut, infrastructure damaged and, most tragically, lives taken, something like 10 in New South Wales and Victoria alone, including one body recovered on the weekend. And I know the thoughts of all of us in this place are with these communities right now. We are seeing people tested and pushed to the brink, but we are seeing the best of the Australian character in times like these. In every affected community, people are showing up for each other in this time of need and being there for each other, and their government is there for them as well. Our immediate support to individuals includes the one-off disaster recovery payment, $1,000 for adults and $400 for children. These are currently available to 46 local government areas. The disaster recovery allowance provides up to 13 weeks income support, has been activated for 150 local government areas. So far, more than $55 million in direct financial assistance has been provided to more than 47,000 claims across New South Wales, Victoria and Tasmania. And as the House knows, we also provisioned something like $3 billion in the budget in October to help communities with the recovery. Now, this is first and foremost a human tragedy. It does have economic consequences as well, pressure on our supply chains, pressure on the price of groceries, and it will have an impact on economic growth in the near term as well. Now, these economic and budget considerations are substantial, but they are secondary to helping people through these difficult times. And so I say to people in flood-affected communities, your government will be there for you. You are not on your own. Communities will need to rebuild. The bill will be substantial, and the federal government will play its part and pay its share.
Give the call to the Deputy Leader of the Opposition.
My question is to the Minister for Small Business. As a result of the Prime Minister's push to ram through new laws to pay back trade unions for millions in donations, the National Retail Association has warned that retailers—
The member for Moncrieff will cease interjecting. The Deputy Leader will resume his seat. I want to hear the member for Page. I want to hear from the Leader of the House.
Thanks, Mr Speaker. It's quite specific in standing orders about applying motives such as what the Deputy Leader of the Opposition has just done there.
I'm going to give the call to the Deputy Leader of the Opposition and ask her to rephrase that question. The member for Petrie, that part of the question to be rephrased. And I give the call to the Deputy Leader of the Opposition.
My question is to the Minister for Small Business. As a result of the Prime Minister's push to ram through extreme industrial relations laws, the National Retail Association has warned that retailers will be forced to pass on increased costs to Australians when they go shopping this Christmas, making a bad cost of living situation worse. Can the Minister for Small Business name one small business who has told her they support these radical new laws?
I give the call. Order. Order. Members on my left. Members on my left, the Deputy Leader was heard in silence. I give the call to the Minister for Housing, Homelessness and Small Business.
Thank you, Mr Speaker, and I thank the member for her question. As I said in this place just a week or so ago, we are meeting with small businesses all the time and discuss a range of matters right across the board, and we continue to have discussions as we work through this important piece of legislation that is actually about getting wages moving. As she would be aware, there are many low-income, particularly in feminised industries, workers who deserve a pay rise, who need a pay rise.
Has the Minister concluded her answer? I give the call. Order. Members on my left will cease interjecting. I give the call to the member for Moreton.
Thank you, Speaker. My question is to the Attorney-General. Why is it important the National Anti-Corruption Commission be established as soon as possible?
Give the call to the Attorney-General.
Thank you, Mr Speaker, and I thank the member for Moreton for his question. At the last election, the Australian people delivered a clear message. They want a National Anti-Corruption Commission to be established without delay. Australians were fed up with delays and broken promises made by those on the other side, and they wanted action. Well, Mr Speaker, this fortnight we plan to deliver on our pledge to legislate a National Anti-Corruption Commission this year. The former government said that they would establish an Anti-Corruption Commission in December 2018, but they never did. Tomorrow this House will continue debate on the two bills that, if passed through both houses, will establish a powerful, transparent and independent National Anti-Corruption Commission. The Commission will have the powers of a standing Royal Commission and will be tasked with both investigating and preventing corruption at the federal level. It will have sufficient safeguards to protect against undue reputational damage and will operate according to the principles of procedural fairness. The bills that will be debated in this House this week are the outcome of months of work and extensive consultation. The bills have been examined by 3 committee inquiries, including a joint select committee inquiry that delivered a unanimous report. This is an opportunity for this House to come together, respect the mandate given by the Australian people and support these bills. We are not afraid of constructive criticism and dialogue. In fact, we've encouraged it throughout the process that led us to this point. There will be significant debate as these bills pass through the House and the Senate, as there should be. But through that debate, we should not lose sight of the task that has been given to us by the Australian people to deliver a National Anti-Corruption Commission with teeth and without delay. This government stands ready to deliver, and I call on all sides of the parliament to join us in that task.
Give the call to the Manager of Opposition Business.
My question is to the Minister for Small Business and again concerns the government's Radical Industrial Relations Bill. Can the Minister for Small Business, I again ask, can the Minister for Small Business identify a single small business that has told her that it supports these radical new laws?
I give the call to the Minister for Small Business, the Minister for Housing and Minister for Homelessness.
Thank you, Mr Speaker, and I thank the member for his question. If he met with small businesses and spoke to them on a regular basis, he would know that there are a range of issues that small businesses are raising, including, of course, staff shortages. He would also know that there are many small businesses paying above award wages to maintain their staff, given the staff shortages. On my left. He would also know that when low-paid workers get a pay rise, that many of these workers spend their money in local small businesses.
Give the call. Order. I give the call. The Leader of the Opposition will cease interjecting. When the House comes to order, I'll hear from the member for Lawler.
Thank you, Speaker. My question is to the Minister for Employment and Workplace Relations. What is the Albanese Labor government doing to get wages moving for all Australian workers, including those on middle incomes?
Give a call to the Minister for Employment, Workplace Relations and Minister for the Arts.
Thanks very much. Thanks very much, Mr Speaker. I want to thank the member for Lawler for the question and for the determination of members on this side and from some on the crossbench as well to get wages moving. Because it's interesting, of the different questions we'll have from the other side, not one about wages moving. Not one. Not one. In fact, when you look at the name of the bill, Secure Jobs, Better Pay, that's why we support it and that's why they oppose it. Now, there's been some talk about the concept that only the low-paid stream, that only the areas of the lowest-paid businesses are the ones where we should get wages moving, as though somehow people on middle incomes are rich. as though somehow those opposite believe people on middle incomes have no need for a pay rise at all. The single interest stream is there to deal with a number of challenges for people on middle incomes who are not the lowest paid but who still have a right to a system where they can get wages moving. It removes red tape, it improves industry standards and it allows workers to graduate from that lower paid bargaining stream through to the single interest. And I want to go through each of those three. In terms of the removing of red tape, there's a whole lot of businesses that already try to engage in multi-employer bargaining, but at the moment the system is incredibly complex with extraordinary red tape going all the way through to a ministerial personal permission before they're allowed to engage. This goes to Catholic and independent schools. It goes to Victorian hospitals that have been engaging this way. But it's also about improving industry standards. The Heating, Ventilation, Air Conditioning Manufacturing Installation Association. It's the people who put together, it's the businesses that put together the air conditioning systems in construction. Now, the industry standard there is well above the award. The industry standard is in the mid-$40 an hour. The award is in the mid-20s. So what you have is businesses there striking enterprise agreements knowing that at any moment they can be undercut. Described by Mimo Scavera, the head of that association, as it's a market that is free-falling. A market that's free-falling. It's a race to the bottom if you can't have a situation where these businesses are able to negotiate together. And the member opposite, that deputy leader, with the interjection she just gave me, have a look at the Victorian childcare centres. Have a look at the individual Victorian childcare centres. And yes, they're small businesses. Oh, she thinks there's only one Victorian childcare centre. No wonder they were so hopeless on their policy on it. No wonder. Only one. Because those workers are now 16% above the award. They shouldn't have a wage freeze until they're low paid again. The single interest stream allows middle-income earners to keep their wages moving.
The minister's time has expired. The member for Wannon, the member for Wannon needs to work on his timing. I give the call to the member for Banks.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My question is to the Minister for Housing, and it concerns her government's decision to abolish the Australian Building and Construction Commission. Mr. Speaker, Master Builders Australia have told a Senate inquiry that the government's decision to abolish the ABCC will exacerbate supply-side pressures in the residential construction industry. How can the minister possibly deliver her promised 1 million new affordable homes when the government has declared war on the building industry?
The order. The member for Moncrieff. There is the member for Page. I'm going to hear from the Leader of the House.
I was going to answer the question. It's directed to me. It's an IR question. It's about the abolition. Everything there turns on the abolition of the ABCC. Everything in the question turns on the abolition of the ABCC. And I've been trying to get a question from them.
The Leader of the House will.
Like, if you think Jim's having a hard time.
The Leader of the House will resume his seat. Order. The Manager of Opposition Business.
Well, Mr. Speaker, it was a question on housing to the Minister for Housing, and if the government doesn't believe that the Minister for Housing is up to answering the question, then that raises some very serious questions.
There's no point of order. The question was in two parts about the ABCC. I give the call to the Leader of the House. Sure. The Leader of the House resume his seat. I'll hear from the Leader of the Opposition.
Well, Mr. Speaker, I'm sorry to be at odds with you, but just in relation to your ruling, this question goes to, yes, the ABCC. That's a fair point. Yeah. But the substance. I'm being reasonable.
Order.
Being reasonable.
Order.
But, Mr. Speaker, the substance of the question goes.
Cease interjecting. I want to hear from the Leader of the Opposition in silence.
The substance of the question goes to how can the minister, direct reference to the Minister for Housing, possibly deliver her promised 1 million new affordable homes when this government has declared war on the building industry? Now, it is not within the remit of the Minister for Industrial Relations to have any capacity to answer that question, which has been directed deliberately to the Minister for Housing. And I don't believe that there could be a ruling to that effect. And I'd ask you to reflect on what it is you've just provided. You might ask the Minister for Housing to provide an answer, and then perhaps the Minister for Industrial Relations could mop it up, whatever it is. But it can't stand that she's not responsible for housing.
Order. Just the question is in two parts. I'll allow the minister to ask the first part and the leader, if he wishes to address the second part.
Thank you, Mr Speaker.
Order.
And I thank the member opposite for their question in relation to the Housing Accord. The Housing Accord is a really important piece of policy. This is the first time we've had 3 tiers of government agree to actually head in the same direction when it comes to housing in Australia. This is about getting all 3 tiers of government on the same page. It's about the industry and the sector. The Master Builders Association were, of course, a part of the Accord and agreed to the Accord, as did other parts of the industry and the sector, including superannuation funds. This is about bringing people together. This is about seriously dealing with housing affordability and the low supply. We need more stock of housing in this country, and the Accord is a groundbreaking, once-in-a-generation piece of agreement to actually implement this and to build 1 million homes from 2024 to 2029. The Master Builders Association agreed with this, and they've signed up to it, and they're part of the Accord.
Give the call to the Minister for Employment Services and Industrial Relations.
Thanks so much, Mr Speaker. I'll tell you what the ABCC and for what residential housing didn't need. I've yet to see the residential house that wasn't built because there was a union sticker in the corner of a safety sign. I'm yet to see the home that couldn't be built because of the flag that was flying at a sign. I'm yet to see any relevance of the obsessions of the ABCC with whether or not a home gets built, whether or not someone's home gets built. Have a look.
Left will cease
Have a listen to what federal court judges had to say about the ABCC. They were blasted for prosecuting union officials for, quote, having a cup of tea with a mate. Apparently those opposite think that's the enemy of residential housing. Described as a minuscule, insignificant affair. Described as a battleship in full steam that treated proceedings as a blood sport. That's what the ABCC delivered. It was a rotten regulator. It was a regulator not there to deal with the issues that the Fair Work Ombudsman would deal with. And the way you can tell, whenever they ask a question about the ABCC, never once do they refer to any of the things that only the ABCC could deal with. So they want to talk about criminal matters, which the ABCC couldn't deal with, or they want to talk about bullying matters or right of entry matters, which were the province of the Fair Work Ombudsman anyway. All the examples that they give don't stack up to a regulator that was meant to be politicised from the beginning, that was there about a fight that those opposite were engaging, because they had one objective: put people in their corners. It was their method of governing, not only in industrial relations. That's what the ABCC did, and I'll be pleased to see it gone.
Order. The member for Page will cease interjecting, and I give the call to the member for Parramatta.
My question is to the Minister for Communications. How will the Albanese Labor government fix the state of the NBN in order to deliver faster and more reliable broadband speeds for Australian families and businesses?
Order. Members on my left. I'll give the call to the Minister for Communications.
Thank you, Mr Speaker, and I thank the member for his question, and I note the great expertise he brings to this parliament in the broadband policy space. And as he well knows, Mr Speaker, reliable, quality, accessible, high-speed internet is essential 21st century infrastructure. And since it was initiated by Labor, the NBN has been a key investment in our nation's future. It's helped Australians stay connected during the pandemic. it's supported telehealth and remote education, and it's boosted economic productivity by expanding access to customers for small business. Mr Speaker, Labor took a policy to the last election to expand the NBN fibre network because we believe that all Australians should be able to access the connectivity and reliability benefits that full fibre broadband will deliver. And what this will do is further boost the productivity of regional businesses, support the increased number of Australians continuing to work, study and transact remotely. And central to this commitment, Mr Speaker, is to ensure that families, businesses and communities in our outer suburbs and our regions aren't left behind. And that is why the Albanese government is investing $2.4 billion to build a better NBN, giving an additional 1.5 million premises full fibre access, including 660,000 in our regions. And the fulfilment of this investment was reflected in our budget. And what it means is that 90% of homes and businesses in the NBN fixed-line footprint will have access to gigabit speeds by late 2025. Now, Mr Speaker, I'm asked about how our NBN upgrade will deliver better broadband, and I've outlined that in respect of speed, quality, accessibility, all improvements in how we conduct our lives, the small business benefits, all of them positive. But, Mr Speaker, I respectfully note that there is a different opinion out there in the context of this question, a different opinion, an opinion that describes this policy as wasteful spending. Wasteful spending. And you may ask, Mr Speaker, who would describe this as wasteful spending? The answer is those opposite. Those opposite think that investing in full fibre broadband for the regions is wasteful spending. What an insult to regional Australia. I'll tell you what the waste was. The waste was 10 years of a failed multi-technology mix, investing in a copper network that was completely unsuitable.
The minister's order. There is far too much noise on my right. The Minister for Resources, the Minister for Industry will cease interjecting. Members on my right will cease interjecting. When members rise, they'll be heard in silence. I'll give the call to the Manager of Opposition Business.
Well, Mr Speaker, on completeness and accuracy, only 51,000 premises completed after—
Resume your seat. Order. Members on my right. Give the call to the Leader of the House.
I'm surprised he wants to stand up at the moment at all, but I reckon that was an abuse of standing orders. And
I think everyone in this parliament knows that was abuse of the standing orders. And I just remind all members, you will get the call out of respect for the office you hold. I ask you to respect the standing orders as well. And I give the call. The Deputy Leader of the Opposition is warned. And I give the call to the Minister for Communications.
As I was saying, Mr Speaker, the masterclass in economic and technological incompetence by those opposite who promised to build an NBN for $29 billion. It became $41 billion, then $49 billion.
Members on my
and
left.
Wait for it, Mr Speaker. It ended up costing $58 billion, double the cost. That's the waste, Mr Speaker. That's the waste.
Order. Give the call to the honourable member for Brisbane.
Thank you, Speaker. My question is to the Prime Minister. The climate summit in Egypt reinforced the urgency of phasing out fossil fuels to prevent catastrophic climate breakdown. And Vanuatu's climate minister says their support for Australia hosting a future summit relies on no new coal and gas handouts. Why then does the government's first budget continue to subsidise fossil fuels, including $1.9 billion to open up a new LNG terminal and petrochemical hub in Darwin Harbour and support for a new gas project in Victoria?
Give a call to the Prime Minister.
I thank the member for his question. He should visit Darwin and actually have a look at what it is. He should actually go and have a look at what it is and look at the facts rather than just the rhetoric. And the fact is that this parliament has adopted a position of 43% reduction in emissions by 2030. We have now legislated for net zero by 2050. And when I met with leaders at the APEC meeting, the G20 and the East Asia Summit, I did speak to them about Australia hosting a conference of the parties, and let me tell you, there's enormous support for it. There's enormous support for it because Australia is back in the game of dealing with the challenge of climate change, including in our region with our Pacific neighbours. Our Pacific neighbours have met with the Minister for Climate Change and Energy at the COP in Sharm el-Sheikh, and there was enormous support there from them, as there was from our European colleagues who I discussed it with in the European Union, the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, the President of the United States and other leaders in our region in ASEAN as well. The fact is that we are dealing with a situation where for 9 years we had no energy policy in this country, no climate policy in this country. Indeed, you don't have to rely upon just us. Peter Tomzett had some interesting comments last week, the chairman of Newcrest. This is what he said. If you don't have a policy for long enough, which has been our situation, you wind up with a situation where intervention is required. This need not have happened had the right energy policy been put in place. What we're seeing is a symptom. We have every form of energy known to humankind in spades, and we haven't been able to harness that into a coherent policy that encourages the right investments to also meet our greenhouse gas commitments as a country. And what we are doing is putting in place policies that encourage investment in new energy, and the cheapest form of new energy is, of course, renewables. But we saw under the previous government 4 gigawatts leave the system and only 1 gigawatt enter the system. No wonder there is a problem. As Richard Court described it, the former WA Liberal Premier, the past decade of energy policy has been a slow-moving train wreck. Well, this government is getting on with the policy that's required. I believe very clearly we have an opportunity to be a renewable energy superpower for the world, to create jobs, to create economic growth and to make an enormous difference to drive down emissions while growing our economy.
Order. Give a call to the member for Swan.
Mr Speaker, my question is to the Minister for Early Childhood Education. How is the Albanese Labor government delivering on its commitment to Australian families to make high-quality early childhood education and care more affordable?
The call to the Minister for Early Childhood Education and Minister for Youth.
Standing member for Swan for her question. Indeed, it was wonderful to visit Carlisle Goodstart last week with the member for Swan and the Deputy Prime Minister. And the member for Swan, as a mother of young children, knows full well just how important it is to have access to good quality early childhood education and care. I'd like to acknowledge the Director Carmen and her staff at Goodstart Carlisle and just congratulate them for winning a 2022 Goodie Award for the services that they provide through Goodstart Carlisle to families. Indeed, Speaker, from our first day in government, 6 months ago exactly today, this Albanese Labor government has not wasted a single day in delivering on our commitments for working families. For Australian families, 1.2 million Australian families right across the nation. We committed to making early childhood education and care more affordable, and we are delivering just that. Easing the cost of living pressures on families who have borne an incredible 41% increase in the cost of early childhood education and care under those opposite. And that cost has been a major barrier to primary caregivers, who are predominantly mothers, returning to work, taking on more work, progressing their careers or taking on further study. And as such, the bill that was passed in this House recently is an important economic reform, as well as a reform to give access to more children for those foundational years of early childhood education and care. And it's an important economic reform because it will help to boost productivity as well as increasing household incomes. But that's not all we're doing, Speaker. That's not all we're doing in this space at all. We have also got a review by the Productivity Commission, and we've tasked the ACCC to investigate the drivers of costs in the sector. We know on this side of the House that making early learning accessible for Australian families is about more than just making it affordable. It's also about ensuring that we have the workforce to deliver on our promises. We recognise how critical it is for a sustainable workforce in the sector, and I've been meeting with service providers, engaging with them and unions and educators to discuss solutions for this. And we're moving on that. We're moving on that, Speaker. We know that early childhood educators make an important contribution to the lives of children and families. We recognise that they're educators and they're not childminders. But we also recognise that this needs a comprehensive approach, a comprehensive plan and a comprehensive approach to ensure that every Australian child has the absolute best start in life.
Give the call to the Leader of the Nationals.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Minister for Health and Aged Care. How many rural towns have now lost a local GP following the government's changes to distribution priority areas?
I give the call to the order. Give the call to the Minister for Health and Aged Care.
Well,
Order.
Mr Speaker, I'm very pleased to have another opportunity to talk about what this government is doing to address the crisis in general practice. This morning, a number of members across the parliament met with the College of General Practice, some of whom join us here in the chamber today, to address what I think is the worst crisis in general practice in the almost 40-year history of Medicare. And it's not just a crisis in rural and regional Australia, although the crisis there is certainly more extreme than in the cities. It is a crisis in the cities as well. And for members of the former government, albeit not with the Leader of the Opposition here, given what he did to the Medicare system in his short time as a health minister, but for members of the former government to get up here and in a holier-than-thou way seek to lecture others about what is happening in general practice stretches irony to its limit. I'll tell you what happened, Mr. Speaker, in the area of
the member for Page, I can hear very well. Can I give the call to the Leader of the Nationals on a point of order?
Relevance, Mr Speaker. It was a very tight question about the number of rural towns that have lost a GP because of the change in policy around the distribution priorities. Very specific. Very specific.
I'm listening carefully to the minister. He is answering the question, and he is 1 minute into his answer, so he has 3 minutes to answer the question. So I give the call to the Minister for Health and Aged.
I'll tell you what the College of General Practice and other groups in the health sector tell all of us, including over on that side of the parliament I know, and that is that 6 years of a freeze to the Medicare rebate, ripping away the ability to recruit overseas trained doctors from 140 different general practice regions in 2018, which is what this question is about, has created a crisis in access to general practice, not just in rural towns, but in metropolitan communities across Australia. He knows that. The Deputy Leader, the Leader of the National Party, knows quite clearly that the crisis in general practice that they created has made it harder for Australian patients across the country to see a doctor than it ever has been. Not only harder, more expensive than it ever has been. And I tell you what, it sits very, very badly in the mouth of those opposite to get up here and seek to lecture us about a crisis that was of their creation. I tell you, Mr Speaker, there is no higher priority for this government than to rebuild general practice after the vandalism of the last 10 years. We put strengthening Medicare right at the centre of our election platform. We are sitting down with them every month, the College of Rural Medicine among them, the Rural Health Commissioner among them, to talk about ways in which we can improve access to general practice across the community, in the cities, in rural towns, in remote communities. We also, in the October budget, put in place a rural general practice package to make sure that there are innovative models of care being trialled across rural general practice, that there are more training placements under the John Flynn program. We have a priority on rebuilding general practice. All the others have is cheap politics.
Order. Give a call to the member for Boothby.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Minister for Skills and Training. How is the Albanese Labor government working with states and territories, particularly South Australia, to ensure that we are addressing the skills shortage the government inherited?
The call to the Minister for Skills.
Thank you, Speaker. And I'd like to thank the member for Boothby for her question. In fact, I'd like to thank her for accompanying me and the Skills and Education Minister of South Australia to announce an agreement last Friday to dedicate vet places to the South Australian economy. These are places that are needed to fill the skills gaps across the country. We've just listened to the Health Minister explain what we inherited under those opposite. We didn't just inherit a $1 trillion debt, we inherited a massive skills deficit. And that's why we need to make sure we strike agreements with all governments in order to deliver those places, those fee-free TAFE and vet places, to ensure that we have skills for our economy. Now, can I say those 12,500 additional vet places for South Australia for 2023 will provide a supply of labour and skills into that economy. And it's fair to say that the extra $65 million was welcomed by the South Australian government. It will ensure 4,000 additional fee-free places in the aged care and care sector, 3,000 places in hospitality and tourism, 2,500 places for the construction sector. We have places going into technology, digital, agriculture. We have 500 additional places for sovereign capability, other places like education, foundation skills, the creative industries. We are ensuring we supply those workers that have the skills that are in demand in this labour market. And what we do understand is this: whilst the nation have skill shortages, each state and territory have particular demands. Some have shortages in some areas and not so much in others. And that's why a partnership between state and territory governments is so important. That's why we're striking agreements in each state and territory to deliver on those skills that are required. It's why, and this actually 12,500 places are of course part of the announcement that we made at the Jobs and Skills Summit to have 180,000 vet and TAFE fee-free places for 2023. It's that investment that will provide the skills that our economy needs, that our employers are crying out for, that workers need to make sure that they are in demand, that they can have secure work. And that's why it's so important. I was really happy the fact that it happened at Tonsley TAFE too. I mean, think of the history at that precinct. It was a place that only 15 years ago lost many workers when a car maker left our shores and disappeared. But what we're seeing now is revival and renovation and complete investment in areas of demand. I pay tribute to the South Australian government for its efforts and its partnership, and I look forward to engaging with more governments before the end of this year to ensure that we deliver these places that are in need.
Give a call to the honourable member for Kooyong.
Mr Speaker, my question is for the Minister for Immigration. Minister, 31,000 people sought asylum in this country by sea between August 2012 and January 2014. Prior to the recent election, the ALP promised to provide permanent protection for those people who have been stranded on temporary visas for up to 10 years. It's 6 months today since the Albanese government was elected. When will we see an end to these punitive TPVs and Chevs?
Give a call to the Minister for Immigration, Citizenship and Multicultural Affairs.
Thanks very much, Speaker, and I thank you, Member for Kooyong, for this question. I acknowledge your deep interest in this issue, and indeed it's one of the reasons why you are the member for Kooyong in this place. I was asked a very similar question by the member for Clark in the last sitting week. I think it was the last sitting week, but fairly recently. I want to say that the issues that she raises are very important to this government in and of themselves. They are important in and of themselves, but they are also important because they go to this government's character. We are a government that keeps our promises in every respect. And members opposite.
Order. Members on my left.
Members.
Member for Groom. Order. Minister will resume his seat.
Members opposite, thank you.
Minister will resume his seat. There is far too much noise in the House. Members will be heard in silence when they're asking questions, and ministers will also be heard in silence. I'll give the call to the minister.
Thanks, Speaker. And look, members opposite seem to find this something that's worthy of shouting. I think they should listen carefully. They should recognise. Yeah, keeping promises. We saw 9 years of broken promises, cuts, cruelty and neglect in this space. 9 long years.
Member for Mitchell.
This government is determined to keep our promises, and this is an important promise. It's to a group of people who arrived here before Operation Sovereign Borders, a group of people who've been in the community for a decade, paying taxes, making a contribution. We recognise this, and we're working through this issue, which has many complexities. I've been meeting with lawyers. I've met with the member for Kooyong. I believe we're meeting again on Wednesday, I think, this week with other members of the crossbench to work through all of these issues, to make sure that we meet this commitment in a way that is consistent across the cohort, that is effective and is enduring, which recognises everything that they have been through as people who have been trapped in limbo and denied so many opportunities through that time. We are doing so also in a manner that recognises the wider circumstances, that recognises that the Prime Minister has said so often, correctly, that what Australians want, and indeed what Australia needs in this place, are policies which secure our border but do not abandon our humanity. That is the watchword with which this government approaches this issue, in a consistent and considered and consultative manner. And in that regard, I was pleased to announce only a few days ago that the government has made changes to the travel arrangements affecting people on TPVs and CHEVs. That reflects also that these people have been separated from families in third countries, again for more than a decade. We will be compassionate without abandoning our resolve to maintain the security of our borders. We've also flagged important changes that have been made to family reunion, again an issue affecting people who've been here for a long time, which goes directly to those two principles, securing our borders, including by securing safer passage to people who need our protection. That is the way that we are approaching these issues, not treating vulnerable human beings as political footballs, as those opposite did for too long.
Order. Give the call to the member for Macquarie.
Thank you, Speaker. My question's to the Minister for Health and Aged Care. How is the Albanese Labor government making life-changing treatments more affordable for Australians living with type 1 diabetes?
Give the call to the Minister for Health and Aged Care.
Well, thank you, Mr Speaker, and I thank the member for Macquarie for her question, because I know how hard she campaigned at the last election on Labor's platform of strengthening Medicare and cheaper medicines. And, Mr Speaker, we are delivering on the promises that she made to her communities across the Blue Mountains and through the Hawkesbury. In July, the maximum yearly medicine bills for millions of pensioners and concession card holders was slashed by 25%. In September, we slashed the price of more than 2,000 brands of medicines, delivering about $130 million back into the pockets of hard-working Australians. And, Mr Speaker, on January 1st, we will deliver the biggest cut to the price of medicines in the 75-year history of the PBS. And, Mr Speaker, we're also delivering cheaper prices for the 130,000 Australians living with type 1 diabetes. In July, we delivered on our promise to slash the price of constant glucose monitoring devices to just $32 per month for adults. Until we acted, young Australians with type 1 diabetes were effectively handed a bill on their 21st birthday of thousands and thousands of dollars to continue using these life-changing devices in adulthood. And last weekend, Mr Speaker, the members for Spence, Adelaide, Boothby and I joined the type 1 diabetes community in Adelaide to announce that the Albanese government will, from next week, slash the price of the next generation of insulin pumps, the Omnipod. Mr Speaker, this cordless technology allows kids in particular to play sport, to go swimming, to muck around in the playground with freedom and security. But the price tag of more than $400 per month for this technology has put it out of reach for most families. Well, from next week, the device will be available free of charge under insurance for the first time, and pods will cost less than $30 per box. 4-year-old Georgie from the member for Spencer's electorate joined us in Adelaide last weekend, and her parents told us, and I quote, "The Omnipod has made a world of difference for her, with the comfort of her insulin device not moving around and no cords, no cannula cords to contend with." One mother at the event told me, she said, her daughter's trial period on the Omnipod was life-changing, but they couldn't afford it after the trial ended. Another mum said that the huge cost of the pods meant they had to put them aside just for special occasions like sports days and swimming carnivals. Mr Speaker, support for this life-changing next-generation technology at an affordable price has been in the too hard basket for far too long, and next week that will change.
Call the Prime Minister.
Thanks, Mr Speaker. I ask further questions to be placed on the notice paper.